Today we will be looking at this combination here. This is the EOS R5 with the 200mm f2 lens. And today will be an initial look at this combination itself. I'm Richard and welcome to ZP Productions, and today I'm sitting down because this is an extremely heavy setup, so I'm not going to stand up and then talk about my video itself. I've purchased the R5 for a week plus now, and I just got this 200mm f2 because I saw a very good price for it. I'll talk about the pricing later. And I believe that, the EOS R5 is a really fantastic system. The R5 is a fantastic camera. The RF lenses such as the 85mm I have here is truly a fantastic lens. And really, if you ask me, just using the RF lenses and the EOS R5 will probably satisfy many people. The thing is that some of us may have legacy EF lenses, so we'll be wondering how does it work out on the R5. And many of these lenses are quite old in design, especially like this 200mm f2. This was designed in the 2008 where 5D Mark II just came out, and it was only a 21 megapixel camera, one of the highest of its time. And at the time, A900 I believe was the highest at 24.6. So the thing is that how does an old EF lens like the 200 f2 work on the modern R5? Will it work better, the same, or lousier than when it was in the DSLR times? And as such, this is the video that looks at this combination because I want to see whether this 200 f2 is truly worthy of using in the modern world together with the R5. How does an EF lens actually perform in the R5 itself? Now, I believe that not all of you want to sit through the entire review. I will just tell you in summary is this combination is truly fantastic. A very fantastic combination, no doubt about it. In fact, it is good enough that if you can afford the 85mm RF and you're looking at this as a portrait combination, then I would say you can also look at this because the pricing is really good. I will talk about it at the end. You can jump all the way to the back to see, but I'll tell you that the pricing is really good when I got this used. Now, without further ado, let's move on to really how does this combination actually work out. Just to note, this 200mm f2 is a very old lens. As I said, it is a 2008 design, and this copy here, I saw the lens code. This should be produced in 2010, I think about 2010 in fact. It's a UY copy. So this lens, I can tell you that it is old, no doubt about it. But it is a super tele. It is one of the great whites of Canon, and it is very good of its time. One of the fastest moto, a 5-stop IBIS, and a lens that is ultra sharp for its time itself. In fact, when a lot of reviews you go online and read, and they're using the old 5D Mark II, Mark IIIs, or maybe the 1DX, they will say that this lens is ultra sharp, no chromatic aberrations, focus really quick, and has one of the best IBIS of its time, 3 to 4 stop handheld. So then how does actually all this work out with the EOS R5, which is like state-of-the-art camera, twice the megapixel of a 5D Mark II, with an AF point more than even any 1DX ever was? How does it work out? Let's take a look at this review here. So first we'll talk about image quality first, because the image quality of the 200 f2 is said to be quite legendary. It is a very sharp lens, and the sharpness extends almost all the way to the corner. The corner does suffer from a little softness, that's what most people say, but rather than me saying all this synthetic stuff and of course things you can read from the review, let's take a look at this picture here. This is shot with f2 itself, and you can see that on the R5, which is a 45 megapixel, twice of whatever 5D Mark II was, you can see that it is very sharp, very tech sharp, all the way from the center. And if I scroll all the way to the corner, it will still be that kind of quality. That's what I can tell you. And if you step down to if you stop down to actually 5.6, it is even sharper. I would say it's sharper probably due to depth of field rather than it is sharper itself, because in the center itself you notice that there is no additional details, but all around the details are very apparent. So this lens definitely can resolve properly the 45 megapixels on the EOS R5, at least when it comes to sharpness itself. But that is just sharpness. How does it actually work out in a real world shoot itself? So in real world shoot, there is of course sharpness because it's portrait, you have to focus on the eyes properly and stuff. Then there's of course the bokeh, and lastly there is some chromatic aberrations that we will talk about. Now, sharpness is a combination of a few factors: the lens sharpness, the sensor sharpness, the model shake, the body shake, and of course the autofocus, which is actually the most essential part of this whole equation. I would say as when the autofocus does hit, and I'll tell you that it works very well, we'll talk about autofocus later. The image quality is phenomenal. You can see that, if you zoom in 100%, by the way, I can't show you the unedited photos because the models don't want me to do that. So if there is unedited photos, it's probably something cropped in some corner. But look at the main photo itself. The sharpness on the lashes are fantastic. They are very tech sharp. The eyes are really tech sharp, super tech sharp. I'll tell you that if you compare to any modern RF lens, I think only the 85mm RF will look a little bit cleaner and sharper. But if not, 200mm literally beats or I don't think that the RF50mm can beat this lens. I think this is definitely sharper than the RF50mm, which the RF50mm was designed for the RF system, designed for this modern 45 megapixel sensor. That is how good this, I'll say, as this lens is when it comes to sharpness itself. Now, as I said, sharpness is not everything. So let's take a look at chromatic aberrations. First, there is chromatic aberration in the high contrast areas, and you can see that the chromatic aberration in the high contrast area is pretty okay. There is some little line there, but you can actually auto-correct very easily. And next, we'll look at chromatic aberrations in the silver bars behind what I'll call as longitudinal chromatic aberrations. And those are something that almost every lens will have. The only lens that I notice have very minimal of it is those GF lenses, which are designed with slower aperture but fantastic correction. And the GF110 is kind of like the pinnacle of that. The RF85 is also very close to no chromatic aberrations, but definitely not at the GF110 level when it comes to longitudinal CA. And you can see that the longitudinal CA of this 200mm is very good itself. There is some slight tinge of color, but no harm is done, and you can pretty much live with it, because if you zoom out to 100%, you zoom out to fitting of the screen and see the photo as whole, the CA are really non-distracting. That is really minor. I'll tell you that the only few lenses that are better than it in characteristics are like the Otus, the RF85, and the GF lenses, which are all designed to be very low CA in nature. There is so much about CA, and lastly we'll talk about bokeh itself. Now 200mm and the R5 full frame, which means that everything is very compressed, and as such the bokeh depth of field due to 200mm is large and generally soft, and also generally pleasing itself. Now, that if you take a look at the bokeh as a whole though, I would say as the DS 85mm may get a smoother bokeh at the expense of a smaller bokeh. So the silver bars will not look that thick and fat in the background, it will just look thinner and slimmer, but the transition may be a bit smoother. I just noticed that 200mm has a bit of jittery transition, and maybe that's because of its optics itself. You can look at the bottom left hand glass of the picture and you will notice that jitteriness slightly, which I think the DS will kind of eliminate. So in terms of quality of bokeh, the 85mm DS may beat the 200F2, but 200F2 definitely has more bokeh, because literally 200mm and a low depth of field will literally blow everything up, will enlarge everything at the background and make it look super bokeh-licious. And that's about it for image quality of the 200mm. Next, we'll talk about IBIS and autofocus. First, I'll talk about IBIS. First, we look at IBIS, and I'll tell you that IBIS of these super tele photos, especially the 200mm and the 600mm, don't seem to work in concurrent with the R5. There is pretty much no gain in terms of the IS, unlike the RF 800mm. By the way, the RF 800mm is very impressive. I don't have pictures here to show you, but I can handhold it at 110 for 800mm lens. However, for this 200mm lens, I only can handhold it about 130, as you can see in this shot here. It is quite consistent, 130, which is about 3 stops. I can handhold it and shoot maybe 10 shots and get like 7 to 8 shots sharp. And I mean tech sharp itself. So the IBIS, I would say, is rated for more like 3 stop plus on the lens. The lowest I can ever go is 115, which is closer to 4 stops, and that's about it. I could not go below that. I tried to hold 1.8. It's totally shaky for me. Now, if this was in conjunction with the R5, I think you can even go lower. So hopefully one day that there is an RF version of this 200mm. Because the 800mm, as I say, the 800mm f11, I can handhold as low as 110 for a 800mm lens, which is absolutely impressive. 800, 400, 200, 150, 25, 10. There is 6 stop of effective IS on the 800mm lens itself, which works in conjunction with the R5, unlike this 200mm. So 130 is stable, 115 is the lowest I ever get, maybe 1 in 4 shots. And if I do indoors at a range of maybe 2 meters to 3 meters, which is close to its minimum focal range, I can hit about 125, which is also about 3 stops. So if you ask me, this lens effective is about 3 stops of IS. There is no gain using the R5 with or without the R5 itself. Next, we'll talk about autofocus, and I think that's where the big combination change comes in, because this combination makes it a lot more usable. Because you must imagine how you're going to use a 200mm f2. 200mm f2 is such a shallow depth of field that is something that you may not want to focus recompose, because that will probably leave you with soft shots. And because it's 200 f2, unless you are calibrated really well for both the lens and the camera itself, it has to go through very good calibration. You'll probably miss a lot of shots, or should I say the shots are always slightly off, just a little bit off. And that is the nature of the beast of a 200mm f2 in the mirrored era. Now, in the mirrorless era, all this goes away, and it is a major, I would say, a boon for the 200mm f2, because now you can literally focus tack sharp on the eye easily, removing one of the problems of having to take 2-3 shots to compensate the shot itself. Now you just take one shot, check, sharp, go on. Take one shot, check, it's sharp. And the best thing, because you can do it in the EVF, it doesn't slow down the motion, and therefore you don't need to hand carry this lens so long. And the next thing about the R5, and I would say it's the biggest improvement, is because of the IAF. Now you just use an initial AF start point, because not because of the lens. I would say as the subject I was using then was the cosplay subjects, my two friends, they helped me model it. What happened is that the AF cannot auto start up. It requires an initial point to lock onto the face, and then after that lock onto the eye. And thereafter it works really well. So the 200mm can IAF with the R5, and I'll tell you that the hit rate for absolute tack sharpness was 95%. As long as I move the initial AF servo on the face, hold down the button, the IAF kicks in, it will always give me sharp shot. And the one shot that I miss is probably soft normally, not totally unusable. And occasionally there are, of course, totally blur shots. That's probably like 1 in 40 or 50 shots itself. So this combination is fantastic, because remember, the weight of this lens is only when you hold up to your eye. So it's going to be really heavy. You have to hold this up so long. But now with this combination, it is so reliable that you rarely need to hold it up so long. You maybe need to hold it up maybe for, I don't know, a few minutes and then put it down. Hold it up for a few minutes and put it down. It makes it really reliable to shoot with this combination now. So as such, I would say as this combination now is a lot more usable than it was in the past. This whole weight of 3.5 kg only needs to come up and go down for a few minutes or seconds. Unlike in the past, where you have to recompose the shot, push your AF points around, make sure it's on the eye, and then focus, and then shoot the shot, check, or maybe take 3 shots to check. All this doesn't really matter in the R5 era, because it is accurate, it is sharp, you can IAF, you only probably need to take 1 shot and it locks on the eye. You don't need to really meddle around trying to fix the AF point on the eye itself. It is truly fantastic. And so, as such, my overall summary of this setup is that this is a fantastic portrait setup. Really, truly fantastic. Even though this is an EF lens of 12 years, with the R5, you produce really great results, as you can see in the 2 photos that I used in this short video here itself. The only thing is that its weight. It is heavy, 3.5 kg, but with the enhanced AF system of the R5 itself, you really don't need to carry up that often, making this a very usable setup. You just carry up, put it on the ground, carry up, put it on the ground. Totally usable if you ask me. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the price, and I said I got this used and I got it really good price. Why? It's because the lens itself was only about 2.8k USD. It translates to about 4,000 Sing dollars, and there was 2 sets in the Club Snap market selling this lens itself at that price. Now, the lenses are quite old. As I said, this copy is about nearly 9 years old, while the other copy I remember is about 8 years old. So they are all old copies, but they work fantastically well. And you know, for 2.8k, it is the same price as the 85mm RF lenses. In fact, the 85mm DS may be slightly more expensive than this lens. So if you are going to consider 85mm 1.2, 85mm DS, you can also consider a second-hand 200 f2 today, which will produce you absolutely sharp and bokeh shots, and really unique shots, because 200 f2 is unlike the 85mm 1.2 and 85mm 1.4, which is really close to each other. You probably can get people who do similar shots to you, and in photography, where you try to get yourself to look unique, 200 f2 is definitely one of the ways to make your shot look unique, because compression, extreme bokeh comes in this package that no other lens can do. And really, that's about it for my today's initial impression of this setup itself. I think this is a fantastic grill setup for portrait photographer. And if you're in the market to buy a R5 or R6 together with an 85mm 1.2, you are also in the market to buy the R5 and R6 and the 200mm f2 in a used condition, as long as you get a good decent copy, don't need to be fantastic in condition, just a good decent copy, I think you won't regret it, because this is totally one of the grills of portrait photography. And that's about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.